Hi, it's Clark on Temptress. Today, in my search for the best inexpensive lithium iron phosphate battery, I'm going to review my first 48 volt battery. This is the review of the Grener Power 100 amp hour 48 volt battery. Up to now, I've only reviewed 12 volt batteries. This is simply because I'm a 12 volt guy. All my equipment is 12 volt, and the sailing community generally is a 12 volt world. So when I got a battery in, when I was on the boat in the Dominican Republic in particular, there was a ready audience for people that wanted a pre-imported battery to put onto their boat. So, it made the video worthwhile because I got to sell the battery to a friend. This one is 48 volts. I wanted to review it partly because I haven't reviewed a 48 volt battery. Wanted to look into it a little bit. But also a friend of mine, Andrew, he's the guy that's done a couple videos, a golf cart video, and we did a Duffy conversion together. Duffy is a power boat that kind of looks like the African Queen that was always electric. It's an electric boat company. Been around for a long time. They all have lead batteries, so doing a lithium conversion was kind of cool. Well, someone else that had a Duffy came to Andrew and said, would you convert mine? And he wanted to do it. So she seemed absolutely serious. So I told a battery company, hey, send me a 48 volt. I'll review it and we'll use it. Well, then she backed out. Some people aren't quite as honorable as other people, and she just, her convenience is what's important. So anyway, now I'm stuck with this battery, but it'll come in useful sometime. It's a nice battery. Let's review it. First off, physical dimensions. I put this on my bathroom scale and weighed it, so it's not going to be right to the pound, but it weighed 80 pounds. It's about what you'd expect. Maybe a tad lighter than I thought it would, but I don't complain because it's easier to move around than some of the other ones in this watt-hour range. I think it might just be lighter because the cells have gotten lighter. They're constantly getting more power in smaller space. So there's that. We'll know when we get into it deeper whether it's, really doing what it should do. Dimensions. Well, let's find out. The length of it, including these little handle brackets, is maybe a skosh over 20 inches. The width is 10.5 inches, and the height, and I measure to the deck. I don't measure the terminals because you might add a lot of wire yourself. So we're going to go to here, add what you need, and that's 8 3/4 inches. So that's the size space you need, and gets a little narrower below this. I actually have a battery in this case installed on Temptress where I didn't have the room for the handles, and I actually cut the plastic off. Just trimmed it right down to the case itself, and that got me another, the 1/2 inch I needed, and then some. Why would you want a 48 volt battery? There's actually a lot of reasons and a lot of advantages to a 48 volt battery. I don't recommend them for everybody. If you've got an existing 12 or 24 volt system, so you have all this investment in components that are already 12 and 24, you've got charge sources. If it's a boat, there's an alternator involved and a starter on the engine. Keeping it all the same voltage has big advantages. Split voltage systems are difficult. In fact, if you're going to run an electric driven boat, where the actual motor that pushes the boat is electric, you need to go up to higher voltages for some reasons that have to do with just how much power a motor uses. And in that case, you probably will have like a 12 volt stereo and lights, and you're going to have to work around that. So I say, don't work around that if you don't need to. So I'm going to talk about a bunch of advantages, but don't feel you need to go 48 volt because it won't matter for you so much. Number one thing is wire. To get an amount of power to flow, it's very simple. The power is the volts times the amps. If the volts go up, the amps go down. So lower current doesn't need as much wire to pass through. In a boat or a camper, not so important because everything's close together. So you might have to buy bigger wire to do the same work, but that bigger wire might only have to run like 10, 15 feet. in a house? First off, you're more likely to have a lot bigger loads. You might have several people living there. You might be running big air conditioners, all kinds of big power stuff. So that's just inherently more current. But also, it's more likely that that current is going to need to move a longer distance. Your solar panels on the roof through your charge controller to your battery might be hundreds of feet. So that wire counts. Copper's not cheap nowadays. So that's a thing. Also, inside of components like inverters and chargers and stuff, same thing applies. If they can operate at a higher voltage, their internal components can actually be smaller, less current. And you're going to find that an inverter that comes from a 48 volt battery to a given AC voltage is cheaper than one that can go from 12 volts. So all good reasons to have a higher voltage. And finally, buying the 48 volt in one case is better in most cases than serializing up 4 12 volt batteries. If you do the serial setup of the 4 12 volt batteries, those batteries will get out of balance with each other. And there's nothing trying to bring them back. So you have to have an active, isolated power supply balancer. If you have gone down that path and you feel you need one of those, searching around, you'll find they're like $500. But I found one for like 50 bucks. It's on my Amazon store, and I used it in the Duffy, and it worked. So give that a shot, because 50 bucks, you know. But anyway, the best solution is to have all the cells under the control of one BMS. And that BMS has the ability to balance all the cells looking at all of them, not just 4 at a time. So anyway, that's why we would want a battery this big. Do we want this battery? This battery came in, and I started doing an analysis of it. First thing I did is put my BankManager on it to charge it up, you know, to 100%. And my BankManager kept saying, give me more power, but the battery shut down. It wouldn't accept any more power. That's weird. So luckily, this battery has a very nice BMS. As BMSs go, the ones that are available in the cheaper batteries, this is my favorite. It's the Zhaozheng Electric Company's BMS. You'll see its icon is a little blue elephant. And for inexpensive batteries, I like that BMS the best. I like the JK as an inexpensive BMS, but usually that's something you would have to buy and put in yourself. I haven't seen a battery company use it. So anyway, I took a look on my phone, went through the app, and what did I find? Well, the BMS's job is not to control charging. I know a lot of people think it is. A lot of people will argue it is. And usually I try to make room for everybody's argument, but this argument is just plain wrong. If you're charging your battery until the BMS shuts down, you are harming your battery, okay? Absolutely provable. In fact, when I go to Europe, I've got a friend there who's actually redoing all the research that I did initially because he just enjoys it. So he's reading all the academic papers, except as a favor to me, he's taking notes. So we're going to have a discussion about how to charge using academic papers and footnotes so you can read the studies yourself. But you just have to trust me at this point, it's wrong. The reason for the BMS is to let the cells come up to the point where they're about to actually fail and never be able to work again and shut down that way. It's just a safety precaution thing. It shuts down when things get too hot, when too much current flows, when the voltage in the highest cell gets too high, and when the voltage in the lowest cell gets too low. Because if you deplete the cells, you can also destroy these batteries. So what happened was one of those. The highest cell got to a voltage of 3.66 volts. There's 16 of these cells, and this one was just charged up a little higher than all the rest. In fact, the difference between the highest and the lowest cell, which is an important consideration to tell if things are balanced, was 0.3 volts. That's a lot. You really want that number to be very significantly like 1/10 that. But 0.1 is like the upper limit that you would really accept it to be. And this was 3 times that. So this battery isn't even usable as it arrived. Well, at first that really upset me. And so I'm thinking, this is a crappy battery. Let's give it a bad review. And then I've had some time to think about it, mostly because it took me a long time to get it to balance. We'll get to that in a minute. I've decided to change my opinion. I think, looking at all the batteries over the last year that I've reviewed, if you buy an expensive battery, the VoltGo or a Battleborn or probably an Epic, though I haven't reviewed it yet, I would expect the cells to be all balanced by the company given to you. But these companies, well, first off, they're not engineering companies. They're a bunch of guys in China that it's a manufacturing company. And they buy cells and they buy BMSs and they buy plastic cases and they put them in. Or very many of them buy batteries, the whole battery with no label on it. And it arrives and they put the sticker on it. And then they're a marketing company and they sell them on Amazon or their own site. They really don't even know much about lithium iron phosphate batteries. They have at least chosen not to balance the batteries, not to make the cells all nice and balanced when they leave their factory. I think we as consumers ought to make a choice. We either spend a bunch of money and expect to have a luxury item that's ready for us to use, or we say, the cheaper batteries can be fine as long as they were balanced. Everything else I like about them, I am going to balance the battery when I get the battery. And regardless of whether I bought that or a more expensive battery, I'm going to have to periodically, at least once a year, rebalance that battery. So I'm going to do another video, probably very next week, the next video I release, that is going to be how to balance these, how to really do a good job and make these top flight batteries. So I've decided it's the luck of the draw that I ended up with bad cells. I'm not going to give it the greatest rating based on that, but I am not going to fail it because of that, because I think it's just the cost of doing business. We need to balance our batteries. Okay, the actual balancing process on this battery took a surprisingly long time. I had to hold the battery up to a higher voltage for 3 full days. During those 3 days, it burnt power out of the highly charged cells until they all evened out, all caught up with each other. In fact, the act of burning the power in one of these passive balance batteries makes heat. And I keep my house just under 80 degrees. I'm a tropical guy. I'm air conditioning here in Florida. The inside of this battery got to be like 97 degrees. So that energy was really going somewhere. It took 3 days to do that, of course, because there's a lot of mass, but it warmed up. The BMS in this is a BMS I've seen many times. It always does a fine job, so I'm not expecting it to overheat or anything. So kind of comes down to the only thing that the battery manufacturers could have done that would be dodgy in here would be if the wires are substandard. So I contacted the company, Grener, and asked them, what wires do you use? And they use what's typical for a case this size, which is 4 8-gauge wires on the negative side and 2 6-gauge wires on the positive side. In reviews I've done with batteries putting out 200 amps, I found that to be just a little under adequate, but since this battery at a higher voltage is putting out 4 times the power at the same current, and this one is only rated to put out 100 amps, half the power, that's plenty copper. So I don't think there's any worries at all on that. And then finally, honestly, this is a battery that's almost 60 volts. You can grab a whole 12 volts, touch them both to the same palm of your hand, you won't even know it. The human skin is just not that conductive. But you get up to this voltage, and it is. I have been shocked at this voltage. I just don't want to mess with it. It's a little more dangerous, and there just was nothing to be gained, in my opinion. So sorry if you're dying to look inside, but you could find another reviewer that looks inside. After I did all the balance studies, got it all balanced the way it should be balanced, I charged it up with the BankManager again, and this time it did a fine job. It could go till 100% and stop. And then I put it on this device. This is my current burner. It's a calibrated device that burns power and keeps track of it. And after running this for a very, very long time, it counted up 101 amp hours. 101 is more than 100, so we have nothing to complain about. New batteries usually have a little more than their rated amount to start with. It's just how things are done. It's kind of the baker's dozen, of batteries. The reason it didn't show higher than 101 is remember there's 16 cells, so that's you can't expect them all to be the same exactly. One of the cells had a little bit less capacity. So once I top balanced it, it was the reason why the battery shut off. Where the other cells had a little more power, but it would have been like 4 amp hours. So not a problem. Once I got the battery all balanced up, I found that the cells were way more imbalanced. Just using the BMS to do it, none of my normal manual manipulations. I charged it up until the top cell was at 3.6 volts. Could have gone a little higher, but there was no need. The difference between the highest cell and the lowest cell in the battery was 0.015 volts. Perfectly good numbers. That let it come up to 57.57 volts, which is well up into where you should be charging lithium, in my opinion. So that would be a 12 volt equivalent of 14.4 volts if you're a 12 volt guy. So it was able to sort itself out given some time and the right conditions. The battery comes with arguably the best manual I've seen on a battery. It's got a quick start guide, and then it has a detailed manual. Detailed manual is well published, very nice images, in proper English grammar, so it's very easy and pleasant to read. But more importantly, every single battery I have gotten through here says charge it to a voltage. And of course, you've heard me go on and on, you can't charge lithium to a voltage. This is the first one I've seen that says charge the battery at constant current, which boils down to just charge it as hard as you can. When the voltage gets up to a level, hold it at that level and taper the current back. That's kind of how you have to do it to keep the voltage where it's supposed to be. And keep doing that at a constant voltage. So they're assuming you have full control over everything else. And then what they say is very correct. And nobody else has actually said it in a manual that I've seen. They say, keep charging until you hit a tail current. Now, I'll let you read all about that, or you can look that up in Google. But that is the right answer if you're in a situation where you have complete control. So if this was in your golf cart, and you had a charger that could shut off at a tail current, or you cared to go out and look at it and shut it off manually, that would be the right deal. You're plugged into the wall, you have all the power in the world, there's no loads coming into the battery, so it gets every bit of what you give it. That simple world works. The BankManager's big advantage, I know I keep harping on my thing, but it's the only thing that'll do this, is in an active world. A world where you're charging with solar and clouds are happening and the amount of power available is fluctuating up and down all the time. And while that's going into the battery, the electrical system is expected to handle the refrigerator, which turns on and turns off, and someone's turning a computer on and lights and all kinds of things. So that dynamic world, you still need a dynamic device. But I'm really happy to see that they actually talk about a model of charging correctly. And it would be, like I said, a great model if you had a car or a golf cart. Golf cart being, unless you have a really long cord, you can't be discharging and charging at the same time. Now let's position this battery on the leaderboard. My leaderboard is a spreadsheet. You're going to find a link to it in the description. I go through all the batteries I've reviewed. I try to at least occasionally update the information that might change, like price. It's never going to be right on, but it'll give you a ballpark to help you make a decision. It just has everything where you can see it. A link to the video where I review the battery, and links to the cheapest way for you to buy it that I found. Sometimes it's Amazon, sometimes that's a link right to the site because I negotiated a special coupon code, whatever. I always do whatever I can do to get the best price for you. Let's go down the list. Capacity. Give it a good 101. We only paid for 100. What can we complain about? Cells. I know I have accepted that we have to balance the cells ourselves now, but to keep it all fair with all the other batteries that I've reviewed before I came to that mindset, I'm going to give it a fair because the battery was actually unusable in the condition that it arrived. Again, that's probably luck of the draw. I'm sure if you bought the same battery, you would have a different situation. It's just what cells they pull out of the pile and put into this battery. Build quality. Excellent. It's got the BMS I would expect at this price point. I like that BMS. Everything about it is fine. I like the size of the wire they used inside. It's fine. It's an excellent battery. The case is, well, virtually the only case you're going to find. In the 48-volt world, you'll also find metal cases that are really designed to go into golf carts. I would honestly prefer them because they have screws and you can open them up more easily if you ever needed to. But since I do everything for a water environment, I prefer a plastic case that can't corrode. And, you know, this guy can be knee-deep in salt water and it won't hurt him any. So I think it's a fine case. Basically, all the batteries at this watt level are in precisely the same case. It's a fine case. The company, I have no history with this company. I haven't had a viewer say, hey, can you please review this battery, or more to the point, I haven't had a viewer say, I've got one of these, I really like it, why don't you review it? That happens. So I can only base it on my interaction with them, but I've interacted with them quite a bit. I've asked the marketing people, and I know that's not necessarily the customer service people, questions that they could not answer, and they had to go to the quote-unquote engineering department, and the engineering department always gave me honest answers, and they gave them to me quickly, and that's telling. So I'm going to give them great. I think it's a great company. Cost to value ratio. Assuming that you get it balanced out, I think it's a great cost to value. I think it's what you should expect at this price point. I think it's a good battery. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, but part of me is thinking, hey, maybe I want to put some solar panels here on my Florida house and flip the grid over so that I can run the house off battery. Maybe get a couple more of these and have a 48-volt system for my very own. It'd be useful because, well, you know, solar panels are the cheapest power. It would be useful because I'm in Florida and every summer a hurricane comes through and I usually lose my power for a day or a week or 2 weeks one time. So it would be really great to be able to be truly off-grid. As it is now, the last hurricane, I basically backed the camper up real close to the house and put the camper where its solar panels were in the sun and ran some extension cords and everything was fine. I just operated off the power system in the camper. But again, that would be kind of neat. So thanks for watching the video. Bye from Clark on Temptress. See you in later videos.